Hi there, my take on Buddhism. This is Randy Green, video 4. I want to begin with that technically, because I am referring to what we call general scientific material. I should give sources to this material, but it would take forever for me to figure that one out. So I suggest instead you look up on the internet, and plus I can't remember the precise name, so my search would be just as valid as yours. But and you would learn something in the process of looking it up on the internet. So the search criteria would be on YouTube, Dalai Lama interview, BBC. You would probably stumble upon the interview I referred to here. The exercise, technically the exercise he was doing, now that I recall it, was one of Dalai Lama's books, which you can then read. I can't recall which one. You can look up books of Dalai Lama, and you can look up on compassion exercise if you like. Something like that, see what comes up. When we talk about the frontal lobe and getting up to the 65 Hertz brainwave signature, you can investigate research. This is done scientifically by researchers having tested Buddhist monks in meditation, how far could they get up in their frequency spectrum, in the brain frequencies, frontal lobe capacity. And you can investigate into details the history of the Old Testament, the history of the Gospels, the background information of Moses, of Aaron, of Abraham. All of this, you can look it up on the internet and study your way through, which would be a great learning process if you want to know where the sources come from, because technically it's not enough just to give hints to a source, which when I was studying at the university, I kept, whenever I was reading books, I always read the notes, because many of these authors, they are restricted from actively pondering upon things, but they are allowed to, in the notes, to put in little comments, and in there refer to a little bit more obscure material, which some has done, and by that you get a broader context of what they're actually working with, because there are restrictions when you work scientifically, which is why I don't fit into that category, because I can't restrict myself that way. I am working within boxes, and I am working within a mythology, but not the paradigm of science, so to speak, because everything I know is beyond sciences, so there would be no point. Plus, the higher order sciences have their own mythology, as I talked about. As we talked about, the laws of the outer world and the laws of the inner world. So this is two different realities, which also comes in play when we talk about enlightenment, and in terms of awakening, and in terms of walking the path from the outer to the inner, which is symbolized in the journey, the exodus from Mitzrayim, the outer reality, and into the inner reality under the reign of whatever divinities or divinity, or the path of the righteous, or the path of liberation, or the path of enlightenment, or the path of whatever you want to call these different passages, that are all connected to, in my perception, to the original challenge that we had after the timeline event, and how to get out of the quarantine, as well as get back into our original purpose and functionality, and our original consciousness structure. So that's what enlightenment is for me. Sorry about that. And the awakening process for me is the path that we have to walk, where we investigate and research and understand and work with knowledge, and work with the knowledge in different ways that allows us to rebuild our original brain capacity. So we need to learn new ways of work with knowledge, which is not encompassed in general sciences. General sciences are linear, or to the best, the highest level is as a process or dynamics. For instance, we have chaos theory that kind of goes into all different levels of the pattern within financial theory, or within, when we talk entropy, and these kind of dynamics that are not mechanics but dynamics. And this is where general science need to push it further and say, okay, what then happens with the mechanics and the dynamics? What do they create together? They create a type of synergy, and that's a completely different process, where things are doing the synergetic leap, as the German philosopher Hegel talked about. He was the one that proposed that idea. But technically, it goes back to the Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, that also talked about the opposition forces that would work together and create harmony on a higher level. So this is how things are repeated. We are always building upon the patterns of what others have made before us. And this is just part of the journey. So none of us can invent the deep plate inside this reality, because whether we will it or not, we are tapping into our own ancestral history. So when we talk about the ancestral history and how that has been passed on within specific priestly generations, that dates back to Atlantis or dates back to the elder races. This is part of the Tara story, and it's also part of the Flame Lords in the Bale material, where the planetary, we have technically two planetary logos. We have Sanat Kumara that comes from Venus, and then we have our own planetary logoi that is a different type of entity. I'm not going to go further into details with this, but the story is in the Bale material that Sanat Kumara, which technically means the young one. This is a Hindu terminology. So he's one of the youngest of the collective of what's called the White Brotherhood, which again are part of what we call alien groups. And he has been overseeing our planet as the story goes, and he is the last one to keep the door open into the other realms outside of our reality, instigating a series of initiations which the Flame Lords brought to our reality field via the Great White Brotherhood, leading to Freemasonry, lead to secret societies, and leading to all of these ancient teachings, claiming to be the origin of all teachings on our planets that leads to liberation or to enlightenment or to awakening. These are three different levels, just so you kind of understand it. We could say the path of liberation is the physical, not to be reborn again. The awakening is the process to get to that level of knowledge that will lead to enlightenment. So we are all talking biological, emotional, and mentally, or we are talking code systems, biological code systems that ties us to the planetary grids, or we are talking about the vibrational fields that gives us access to timelines and vibrate up the energies in a concentric patterns that allows us to create that field around us from where we can access via the vibrational energies and the timelines we're connected to, the consciousness potentials that we have in our radiation field, which is also called the brain field, that is typically downloaded from our upper template and into our 6-layered energy system, from where the first 3 layers goes with the code system and the vibrational field, and the 3 higher layers goes with a new set of code systems, a new set of radiation energies, and a new set of consciousness potentials that are built into our template. These are also part of the sciences that I put on the whole academy. And just to warn you, they're very high leveled. And this is why I'm beginning to make these different series where I talk about the same things, but within different contexts. So you get known frames of references from where you can adapt the knowledge that I'm proposing into already existing ideas and thought systems. Sorry about that. My voice is beginning to get a little bit strained here. But I will, as always, work my way through it, and eventually my voice will stop having this throat issue as when you get strained and have overused your throat muscles. So back to the handing over of information from the different lineages. Again, I'm here talking about the elder races because they are behind Buddhism. And I'm not talking about the planetary hierarchy. And there was a reason why I wanted to touch ground with Sanat Kumara, him being the gatekeeper between systems, because that story is actually attributed to Tara, which is a Hindu goddess. She is doing that. Tara is the one that is in her great compassion, is sitting between this world and the other worlds and are keeping the gate open, and she will sit there to the end of times because she has this great compassion. And that is what the Bodhisattva is all about. That's connected to that female deity that is holding the door open that leads to that knowledge that you need to have to get out. The same idea goes with when you talk Hebrew, deeper mysticism. Whenever God is present and teach people, it is through the Shekinah. and the Shekinah is female. That's the female presence of God inside our reality. And she belongs to, in the Sephirot of the Kabbalistic tree, to Malkut, and she is connected to a group of different archangels from where are also doing her bidding, so to speak. But they are part of another, they are referring directly to God. That was a side element. The idea and the concepts of the Shekinah is mirrored into the misinterpretation of the Holy Ghost, which we know in the Pentecostal event in the book of Luke. Talks about how these, when Jesus is around, so the saying goes, he said to his followers when he had resurrected after his death, that's in the Easter event, he teaches his disciples and the groups that were around him, and he tells them when he leaves after 40 days that I will leave, but I will leave behind the Holy Ghost, or the Spirit of the High, or the HaKadosh, which is the Shekinah in Greek translation. So this has again been interpreted as part of the Trinity of the divine force that is the Father, the Son, and the Shekinah, which should be rightfully interpreted as such. And the Son goes with, as I talked about, the Benai Elohim, which are the sons of God, which of course then in some of the older interpretation of who and what Jesus was he was an angel and not a prophet, as the Muslims claim, but he was an angel because he was a Benai Elohim, so that means he was a son of God. So that's an angel per definition, or a messenger. So again, going into this, the original languages and the interpretation gives a completely different interpretation of, for instance, the Trinity would then be the supreme powers that are emanating out what we could call manifestations of themselves into the Benai Elohim, which are the sons of God, and they would then use the Shekinah, or the presence of the supreme powers inside our reality, to represent knowledge and wisdom, which is what the Shekinah offers to those who study the secret teachings or the mysticism within reality. They are connecting to Shekinah. Shekinah is part of the original construction, and that's the holographic teaching system. So see, I'm tying back in into that level of information as well. So that is what Joshua technically said when he left. He said, well, you will always have the holographic teaching system if you're capable of getting the correct level of consciousness, abilities to connect to that, from where you will technically get the information you need. And that is, I can't claim that that's part of Buddhism. I can't claim that that would be a little bit too far-fetched, because there is no such thing as in kind of the Buddha says, well, I am getting the information via wisdom or what have you. But let us just keep it as an open, he might have known, he might not have known. It might have been some of the female deities that are represented in Hinduism could be different emanations and versions of the different aspects of the wisdom aspect that is a female presence inside our reality. And the origin of it are we see it in Egyptian mythology as well, where you have Ma'at, the order of the world, and the Egyptian goddesses are often representatives of the order of the world, which we're also seeing in Justice and Justita and these what we call the Roman gods that also have the female representatives are often either war, futility, or justice. So we are having that level there, even though you can talk about, well, the progressive races are the warriors. Yes, they actually have a branch that are warriors, and these are the Pleiadians, which many don't really know of, because they have a tendency to make the Pleiadians into these weird nymph-like beings, which they are not. Well, there's a branch of them. There actually are. That's the ones that are the daughters of Atlantis. And not the city of Atlantis, but the god Atlantis. So again, Greek mythology, study that a little bit so you get into these different branches of the 7 sisters, which originally technically were 12 sisters, that were different Pleiadian lineages that were represented on our planet, and has influenced quite a lot of what we know of the sciences that we actively have in use on our planet today. And that is what the Shekinah, that's part of their technology, their teaching systems and their cube systems. That is what the holographic teaching system is. But the holographic teaching system can also be used by other races, and they have made adaptations to that as well. So all depending on your genetics, you will tap into different levels of the Holy Ghost, the Shekinah, the holographic teaching system, the original level of wisdom. And it is interactive. It will only reveal to you what you already have the capacity to reactivate as knowledge within your own energy system. You cannot access anything you are not already granted as part of your original template, as being this is something you have learned part of the Pill Project. So this is also part of the recalling of the original sciences. So we're here straying a little bit out of, but there is another way to get access to what we could call transferred memory implants. And that is what a TD technically is. And we're talking about the elder races. And if we are to envision that we are now having a human operator or in human form that is inside a reality that at this point in time is under the hijackers and therefore technically hostile, and by that not fully allowed to link up to the holographic teaching system, which we know from the Kabbalah and we know from the mysticism and the work. Enoch is a Jewish mystics. He works with Jewish mysticism. That's what the Book of Enoch is all about. And that often to access these higher levels, you have to have the guide. That's where the angels come in, the messengers, or these archetypes, or whatever you want to call them, that leads you to the different realms, into the different heavens, into the different holes of wisdom, into the different holes of knowledge, into the different holes of whatever the general abilities that we call general sciences. So they are divided into different layers. And that is another way to depict the work on the tree. So my best, if we are to say, what can you use the Book of Enoch for? That is if you work with the Kabbalistic tree and you're trying to get access to the different layers of the tree and what the knowledge is there. I could also refer you to Dion Fortune, which has done a very good work with that one. But again, it is a little bit occult, and she unfortunately got affiliated with different branches within British mysticism and occult sciences that are not really worth working with, such as Crowley. So she got a little bit tainted there later on. But her book on the Kabbalah and the interpretation is, of course, a crossing between Christianity and original mysticism that goes with the Masonic teaching system behind the Western interpretation of the Kabbalistic tree. The Jewish interpretation of it is somewhat quite different, and that is hidden in the records of what's called the Hakadosh, and that goes in a different level. And there are traits of this within certain rabbinic teaching systems, but it has always been kept as a secrecy, and you technically only get access to that level if you are granted it by the different gatekeepers that are positioned in front of each and one of the Sephirot. You have to go through a series of tests to be able to access that level before you get in contact with the angelic powers and the way showers that are part of each Shekinah. Each Sephirot. You see Sephirot, Shekinah, it kind of goes hand in hand there. And as always with the Kabbalistic tree, it is connected to the underworld. So that is the Kliptort, that is the reversed version of the Kabbalistic tree of life. So that goes with the powers that are trying to prevent life from unfold and the powers that are trying to sustain life to unfold. And the work on the Kabbalistic tree is not to gain wisdom on its own. It's also to gain higher levels of life force that will lift you up to the Ein Sof, where you will be technically, in the understanding of the Kabbalistic work, be enlightened and endowed with a seat on the right hand of the Godhead, which are the supreme powers and not Yahweh. So that is the Elohim teaching system. That's technically the background of the Kabbalistic tree, which is no surprise because it has similarity in the original teachings that we find as part of the Anunnaki mythology. Interesting. Anyway, so there are groupings there, and there is a scientist, which I again forgot his name, that actually tried to make the connection between Jewish mysticism and the Mesopotamian mysticism. And I think he did a very good work trying to combine these two things and actually saying that the verbal interpretation of the Kabbalah stems back from the exile in Babylon, which would not be completely outlandish considering that quite a lot of the Bible is a derivation to some degree of the Mesopotamian mythology. Okay, put that one aside, but this is important so you kind of get the bigger picture of when you work with things, it's not just, oh, this is the only system that has the truth. It's all reflected in all the systems. And that's why when we talk about the esoteric teachings and the Blavatsky branch that came out and said the ancient wisdom is to be found in all teaching systems, which I agree upon. The question is just which group, which section, which race, in what way, in what manner. So that's one way to go through the Shekinah and the enlightenment processes of knowledge that goes with meditation and inner work. But there is a little bit of what we could say a transfer of memory and ancestral history that the Syrian elder races, including the Syrian A's that are the later descendants of these white elder Syrian races, have invented, and they invented what we call the technologically enhanced genetics. It is a type of a parasitic entity that lives in symbiosis that are inserted into the human form. And we are seeing that as well explained in some of the Egyptian mythology that also had a branch of Syrian A's as overseers of that project after the fall of Atlantis. And the pharaohs that are working with the Uraeus, the snake that is part of their signature of kingship, is when they connect to the Uraeus, it latches on and lodges itself behind the left ear and become part of the pharaoh as he gets initiated and anointed as the king or the pharaoh of his realm or his and go into being the leader of the jurisdiction that he is in control of under the gods. And I have in one of my timeline travels encountered that ceremony and what that actually entails. You can look that one up as well, how the Uraeus is inserted. It's not said that way, but what it symbolizes and what that means for the two kingdoms of Egypt and going further back, because it was divided in two levels. We had Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and you can say it's kind of reversed because what we would say naturally would be the lower Nile Delta, as in kind of going further down to Africa, would be the Lower Egypt. But I actually think that's what they call Upper Egypt. Anyways, but that point that goes down with towards Africa, more under the Nubian territory, Nubia territory, whereas the northern level, as we understand of it, going out to the ocean level, is more connected to what we call the groups that are around the Mediterranean. So they were divided, again, when we talk about the division of Egypt, that point that goes further down to Africa, more oriented towards the Orion level, the Osirians, whereas the upper level were more, which is not Upper Egypt, but that level that goes up to the ocean and into the Mediterranean area, were more focused on the brotherhood teachings, that is the avian mammal. So we're again having a division between the different factions there. And of course, there are sub-factions, all depending on which pharaoh they had. And the Uraeus and the nobility that goes with that are some of the oldest pharaohs, and later on it's just a kind of adaptation that happens once the gods technically left Egypt, and they were left with their myths and their rituals and what the priestly lineages said that they were anointing people into. So this also goes with when we talk about the anointment of Jesus as after he has been baptized by John, is that the Shekinah knowledge, wisdom descended upon his head as if like a dove. And this has always been depicted as a dove that is kind of descending upon him. And that's why the Shekinah has often been symbolized with the dove and wisdom with the dove. But that's not the case. The text says that it descended upon him like a dove, not as a dove, but like a dove. And you see this little twist where you say, well, as and like are technically the same. No, it has different meanings in Greek. It's like a dove. Like you have a form that is like an apple. It's not an apple, but it's like an apple. It's round. So it's something that is, the motion looks like that. And that's what Joshua was teaching from the Shekinah. So that is also depicted in some of the, when you do Middle Age depictions, some of them are actually showing it as a kind of craft. And then you've got a light beam that raised down upon the head of Jesus, which is also interesting, which is probably closer to the truth than the dove. So again, just putting it, this one into context. So we have this situation where people get access to inner knowledge either via technology or via link up to the original holographic teaching system, aka the Shekinah, aka wisdom, aka Sophia, aka the Holy Ghost. So that makes people, from that moment on, they're no longer just humans. They have got access to the heavens and the knowledge beyond the human realms, beyond the veil, so to speak. But there's a way to go around this when you can't do that initiation and the original anointment, which is part of the Gospels. And that's what in the Gospel of John, where it said that the word accessed reality and the dark forces did not catch it, which are part of the translation, freely translation of the beginning of Gospel of John. So this is also the word. The word is the Shekinah. That is the presence of God within this reality. And if we interpret that a little bit deeper, as in kind of that the Joshua figure was born by a maiden or a young girl, would it be a more accurate, not a Greek translation, because the Greeks did not understand the full scope of the Jewish mythology that is the origin of Christianity? Wouldn't it not be more correct to say that Joshua was born with the knowledge of the Shekinah? So he carried the original inner knowledge. He was born with it. Not that he was born by a maiden, but he was born out of wisdom, more correctly. So he was born with that knowledge that are hidden in the Hakadosh, the holy text, and the secret teachings, which would explain why he would blossom up and have all of these grand discussions with the rabbis and the different groups within the Jewish community, because he was teaching with one that had authority, as it is translated. So that also gives ground for some understanding of that. But if you can't do it the good old way, that were part of the restoration program and the original path out of this mess that we are in, then the Syrians came up with a little invention that they used for the fall cycle after the fall of Atlantis, and that is technologically enhanced genetics. They technically engineered the forerunners of all later types of implants. Go without saying. And that type of symbiotic cluster of consciousness units of one of the elder races and their memory base, including the ability to link up to the holographic teaching system via the TDs, the symbiotic inserted what we call hybridized form of higher order types of genetics from a different group of elders that go together and create that, or just an individual one, the progenitor of that, would then be inserted into a human before it was come into birth, so to speak. So it was already part of the human when that human that was supposed to carry on the teachings of the original races to show either the path out physiologically and get out of the reincarnation cycles or the regression spiral, or getting into the level where you would access your timelines and be able to clear up your work and gain your original knowledge, or go into the path of enlightenment where you would develop yourself into the fifth cycle, where you would develop that higher order energy system that will lead you to the hypergates that will allow you to leave the system as purified genetics, following the original rules and principles and laws of energy and the way to use energy correctly according to the reality field we are part of, because that's what the laws of quote unquote God are. That is, the reality field is engineered in a specific way, and if you want to prosper here, you follow the dynamics of that world you're part of, which we are learning the hard way in our world as it is right now, because we have distorted so much, so everything is breaking down around us. So the other way to go around is that you get this child born. They are technically already a little bit hybridized. They are already pre-engineered before birth and inserted into a woman. That could also be the interpretation of being born by a virgin. Technically, there is a father, but he's not the real father because that child is inserted into the womb. She's pulled in. She got this hybrid inserted. Heard the story before. And with that, that's the child that is born that is half alien and half human, half God, half human. This is where you can interpret that one as well. So they are technically born by a maiden because even though she might have had intercourse, the father is not the father, but he is the representative as being the father of the child as we're getting it in the story of Jesus. And there it said, well, the true father was God. But we have that in Greek mythology as well. Heracles and the Minotaurian. These are all sons, demigods from Zeus that had this tendency to take on form as some kind of animal and then come in and impregnate specific females that he found to be very interesting. He would lure them and seduce them in his animal form, and then he would transfer himself into human form, or he would take on the form of their spouses and then fornicate with them and create offspring that then had this hybrid gene sequence and not the pure low-level earth human sequence, as we also learn of with the Nephilim that did the same with the females in the book of Genesis. So you're seeing it's in all cultures. And I know from John Mack and some of his research where he was doing regression, and he got some of the alien projects, and you can do the gate to Cosmos, I think it's called, by John Mack. He had talks to people in Africa and other places, and they're telling the same story. So it's part of our cultural history. No matter what type of people you talk to, it's been here as long as we can almost find accounts of it. And it's also part of the cultural memories. And if you have got a downsized civilization that no longer knows these are just another group of what we used to be, but will then see them as gods when they come in their crafts and what have you, with light and thunder and whatever, and then it will become gods that they are submissive to because of the hijacking, which were part of the re-engineering of the human genome to put us into that state of not really having access to our true knowledge and understanding. And there you begin to see the plot of having these operators coming in, these secret teachers coming in and trying to get us back on track and say, well, you made a decision, or your elders did. That was a fucked up decision. So this is how you get out of the jam and the trouble, the jeopardy that you have got yourself into. And then as time passed by, it has become extensively more difficult to get people back on track, because now we have so much more information and so much more to figure out what's the true information and what's distortion. And the easiest way is just to go all the way around and say it's all distortion, and then see what levels of truth is there, and then try to dig deeper and find the levels of truth. So we're going with the technology that the CRNA is inserted, and that is what the Buddha was born with. And that is also part of what is within when we talk about the lineages behind the Dalai Lama. This is also inserted TGs as far as I am concerned. But the one that comes in and carries this, if we go with the Balaam material, when we talk about Joshua and his insertion into this, they claim that he was overshadowed by the Great Syrian. And that could also indicate that a specific vessel was built for Miriam and Joshua, and they had insertions that linked them up to specific technologies. This would be because if you have the complete genetic signature to access the original holographic teaching system or the knowledge of the original world construction, then if you get captured and you get chopped up, then these genetics can be replicated by the different alien factions that are here that should not get access to the foundational engineering of our reality field, because that's under the Ancient One. It's highly protected. So that has been also part of some of the mistakes that have been done, having people inside our reality that technically had the great codes to the different original technologies. And then we have had what we call the later version with the TGs that are more secure, because the TG can be isolated. It can be removed easily, can be pulled out. when the prospect of the operator is being pulled into the artificial fourth dimension, these TDs can be pulled out, which some of the android races have done as well, and try to insert them into themselves and see if they could get access to the higher levels of our reality that way. So some of the pull-ins of the original abduction scenario that has been done by different alien groups that comes from other systems that doesn't belong here has targeted people that had these original TDs inserted but didn't know of it, and by that has got it removed. And some that has got this removal, sometimes it activates a memory level, other times they actually get less knowledge of what they actually have. And some of the teaching systems that have been put out here at a later time has had as the main goal to try and activate some of these ancient inserted technologies in humans that have them but are not aware of it. And the Colontics, in my understanding, is also an attempt to try and activate some of these ancient technologies in whatever's left of the original descendants of the Sirian B lineages. So again, this is my interpretation of stuff. So that's why the teachings varies, because they want to either activate the original ability to link up to the original template structure, which goes with consciousness and a lot of difficult work. And then there's the TG base that kind of goes with, yeah, you have the TG and then you kind of are linked up to whatever you need to know. And that grants you access to the humanoid technologies and humanoid levels of the ancient racial grids that goes before the fall of Atlantis, which is the target for the main of the races that are here, because they want these ancient types of genetics and are trying to replicate them to get into the fifth cycle using these ancient versions of the original humanoid genetics before the fall of Atlantis, which kind of destroyed the last real lineages that we had on this planet. Okay, so if we say that the Buddha had the TD, but he also had the natural ability, because there's absolutely no doubt that his lineage goes very, very far back into our ancient history, and it's not Atlantean, it is something else. It could be Lemuria, it could be even further back, it could be into the planetary system of Mercury, but that I think it goes to the planet Mercury, and it goes into that parallel system. So it is technically an off-planet. The Great White Brotherhood in the esoteric teachings claims he is a lunar. I disagree with that one, but they are celebrating the Wesak, I think, every May, as that is the proposed birthday of the Buddha, because they see him as a lunar insertion of the hierarchy. And we remember the hierarchy, the planetary hierarchy of lunar monads. And that's why the whole Great White Brotherhood is kind of, it sounds a little bit, but it is the masters are the ones, the Adashis, the ones that have done the return path. They are lunar monads that began that initiation process in their own system. And when the lunar scheme fell and they became refugees here, they continued their work under the Venusians and under the Flame Lords, and under technically the Great White Brotherhoods are the Flame Lords of the Venusians. But these are also Sirian A's. So that's just my take on it. But the Great White Brotherhood or the Guardian Alliances have many factions within them, because it is an alliance of different factions. So we can have different people that talk from, I'm talking from the Guardian Alliances. Yeah, but which branch? Which main group? The Ra Confederation, the Sirian A's, the Sirian B's, the Orions, the Osirians, which one that were part of the Guardian Alliances over the course of time, and the attempt to try and get us all out of the mess from the timeline event. So that's more background information that ties into that one. So that's technically where he had. So the Buddha had to be put into scenarios and circumstances that ignited the inbuilt information system he had in his energy system, aka the TG, as well as the hybridized type of genetics that allowed him to work with his brain features that were similar to the beginning processes of the fifth cycle, so that he could teach the bridge from the fourth cycle and into the fifth cycle using access to ancient knowledge of the original fifth root race that was seeded into the areas of India, that is the Aryan Shivas, the original root race of India. goes with the priestly lineages, and that is, in my opinion, why he got confronted, as Joshua did, with the different priests and their rituals and their interpretation of the ancient teaching system. And with that, I'll go into the next video. Thank you.